Hi, Joe. How are you today? It's so lovely to have you on board the Arc Education.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much. I'm honored to sit and have a conversation and just sort of collaborate on some things and share some thoughts and ideas. I appreciate this.
I really appreciate having the opportunity to work with you as well. For those who are listening to this recording, I apologize for the technical problems that have happened this morning. For some reason, the live on the Zoom wouldn't work, so we decided to record the session and continue and put it up straight after we've recorded it. For those of you who are watching this recording, thanks for joining us, and I'd like to introduce Joe McQueen, author, principal, educator supreme, and someone who I have resonated with for quite some time. We're probably we're cut of the same cloth, Joe. We were just having a conversation about that, about our experiences and how we've worked with at-risk youth. So just so that people can get to know you a little bit, although some people who are watching this recording know you very well by the sounds of it. Read your book, watched everything that they can on YouTube, which is you're much more famous than you realize, I believe. But what got you into the whole space of trauma and restorative practice and teaching and learning?
Um, I think a lot of it has to do with my own upbringing. I work with kids every day that are versions of me. You know,
You've
many
never
years
finished
ago.
though.
I'm not sure we need to attach numbers to how many years, but Um, so I started off, I worked in residential treatment and I just thought, oh my gosh. And that was my first, experience. I was just out of the military and I kind of had this view on the world that, you just tell people what to do and they'll do it, gosh darn it. And when I started working with these little kids and I saw how much trauma and I read the things that they'd been through and I thought these are my people. And I got a lot of training from a lot of really smart people that taught us how to work with kids. And I think over the last 25 years, I've just soaked in everything. And I ran into a lot of situations where I thought, I'm being told how to work with kids that I've been working with for 20 years by people who've never worked with the kids that I work with. Um, and I don't think that they understand that, a lot of the things that you're putting out there aren't going to be effective in the actual trenches,
Mm,
in the everyday working with these kids. And so I thought, I'm okay at this. So maybe I'll see if I can start teaching people how to see things differently through that kid lens. Because I think
mm,
a lot of times as adults, we see it through our lens and we make it, it's about us, it's our story, and it's never your story, and it's never about you. It's about them and what they're going through. And so being able to disconnect yourself from the idea that, I feel disrespected or I feel like they're not talking to me okay, it that it's not about you. Um, you can have those restorative conversations at some point when our students aren't in crisis or melting down or
mm,
struggling with things. Once you've developed that warm relationship with them and you've established really good communication and trust, then you can start having those conversations that, hey, when you're really like struggling and you cuss at me, I understand you're angry and I'm easy to cuss at, but we got to find some different ways to do those things because you can't go through your whole life being this angry and lashing out this way. So let's
mm.
work together to find a different way to communicate because your feelings are valid and they
Yes.
need to be shared and they need to be heard. But let's find a way to communicate them in a way that everybody can understand them. And so I just started working with a lot of kids. Like I said, I've been doing this for almost 30 years, 27, and it's been residential detention centers. I'm currently an alternative principal at a school where we got about 100 alternative kids. So they've been removed from their schools because of various reasons. I wouldn't say behavior. Some of it's behavior. Sometimes it's more social emotional struggles and adaptation and anxiety and things like that. And we created a place where they thrive. And I thought, we're not doing anything magical. We're really not. It's super simple. We just separate ourselves and say, it's all about you every day. And how do I work with all of you and the whole you? And be calm and be mellow and be, what I call that solid object. And then it's crazy that it works. People say, oh, we had so many issues with that kid. How are they doing with you? And I'm like, I mean, we struggled at first for a couple of weeks, but gosh, they're thriving. They're doing great. And they're like, what'd you do? I'm like,
Yeah.
well, we just weren't mean. We weren't
Put
jerks.
them in an environment that
Yeah.
they feel human in.
Yeah. We opened our ears and let them talk. We heard them. And then we found out that there was 25 issues behind the one big issue. And we started addressing those little by little.
Absolutely, absolutely. Our experiences are really similar in that I worked with at-risk students in a middle school here in New Zealand, in middle of gangland,
Mhm.
in New Zealand. Amazing young people, absolutely amazing young people, mostly Maori, um, and who were the lowest, and I say the lowest, put that in inverted commas, intake, lowest 5% of the school intake. So they were generally, they had to be at least 2 years below their chronological age in their academic abilities and things. And obviously they all came with incredible behaviors. But like you, I found that when you treat them like humans, fellow humans, not feral cats,
Mhm.
like some people, they treat them with authority rather than compassion. Um, I remember I worked with a teacher assistant who was actually very close to being a qualified teacher, but he he never he never qualified. Um, but we worked very closely together, and I remember the first 6 weeks of every year he'd be saying to me, "Oh my God, what are you doing? What are we doing?" It's chaos. And I'd say to him, do you remember the first 6 weeks are always like this, but we are
Mhm.
sticking to our plan. We are not yelling and shouting and giving commands, and we're building a whānau or a family. And 6 weeks, after 6 weeks, everything would settle. And yeah, I mean, that's not to say that it wasn't, things didn't flare up every now and again, but after 6 weeks, the relationships were solid. And we were a team. Actually, we were more than a team. We were a family. And those kids, like you said, absolutely thrived. And
Mhm.
some of them went on to go to high school in accelerate classes, or classes that push them beyond that go faster than the other classes. So um, for a lot of them, I found too, they were neurodivergent. I don't know if you find that with your school. Are a lot of your children dyslexic, ADHD, ASD, all those neurodivergent things?
Yeah, we have a pretty big population of, I think it's pretty rare for us to get a student who's not in some way neurodivergent.
Yeah,
In the many categories
that it
that
comes
fall
in.
under that big umbrella. And it varies, of course, in intensity. A lot of that has to do with trauma as well. Trauma tends to intensify those already present struggles. And so you got to be able to deal with the idea that they really do, it's their version of the world. And and so far, everything they've done has, been a struggle, and they've been surrounded by people who don't want to see past that. They're so much more focused on what needs to be done, the rules and the academics. And
Regulation.
I tell educators all the time, once you build relationships and once you get those kids bought into you as a human, the academics will come. The academics are easy.
Absolutely.
Even for students who have, learning differences, if you raise the bar, they'll meet it. What they need to learn, they'll learn. And once we stop focusing on, by golly, you're going to follow my rules every day, all day, and never,
It never
deviate from
works.
this system, well, then we have to change the system. And I think what we struggle with is we've got a lot of educators that have this idea that this is the way we do it. This is the way we've always done it.
Mm.
And when I was a kid, they just, they smacked me at the ruler and whooped me, and I fell right into place. Well, we don't live in that world anymore. We live in a different world, and our kids are going into a completely different world than
Than
we
what
live in.
it is now, even.
Yeah, I've got
Absolutely.
a granddaughter. She's about 18 months, and I think to myself sometimes when I'm playing with her, I have no idea how to prepare you for the world that you're going to live in because I don't know it.
We don't know. It's
So I think that.
changing literally by the month. You know,
Mhm.
every month there's something different that comes out, and yeah, for me, the solution is to um, bring humanity back into education. We've got to
Yeah,
focus on our kids being human beings, not products, not not people to go in a workforce either. They're human beings. And that whole workforce thing, like you said, will fall into place
hmm
if we develop them as human beings, develop them, their connections, being able to connect their relationships and the communication, you know?
yeah. I think if they can learn how to function and adapt and to understand, become more self-aware, and
Mm.
become more able to say, I'm okay, and sometimes I struggle with these things, and that's okay because I'm not alone. A lot of people do. Um, then they're not as likely to fall into that cycle that they may have come out of because they believe that they can be bigger than that and that they can do something different. And somebody has to empower them. And if the system is just saying, look, I need you to score high on tests, and I need you to come to school every day, and I need you to be academically strong in these areas. Well, I mean, that's great. If we just had robots, we would be perfectly able to program them. But the world doesn't need
Absolutely.
robots, the world needs humans. And one of those little humans that we take the time to be compassionate with and care for could change their entire society, if not the world. I mean, I think as educators, we all go into education because we want to help kids. And then we get into a system where it becomes less about helping kids and more about helping um, numbers and more about
Compliance,
helping. Yeah,
compliance,
yeah,
basically.
exactly. And how good does our facility look, or does our school look, or
Yeah,
can
it's
we put
all
these
with
numbers up
those.
and everybody be proud?
Yes.
And then you try to hold that passion into your tiny little 15 by 15 square foot room, or 20 by 20, whatever you're given. And they just kind of beat it out of you eventually. And I think that's why, I know here in the US, we have a huge teacher shortage. And because teachers don't feel supported, and they don't feel like they're respected, and they don't feel like they're allowed to have autonomy to do things the way they want. And so, I mean, how many teachers, how many passionate, good human beings are we going to lose in a field that's the most important field in worldwide before we say, maybe we should take another look at our system and try to do things that are more compassionate based and kid centered. The academics will come, the kids will learn. If you get them in the classroom and they feel safe and they feel heard, they'll learn. That's
They'll
that's the
learn.
easy part that we overcomplicate.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you there. And I've noticed that, especially over the last maybe 15 to 20 years, um, that teachers coming into the system have been almost inducted by the system into becoming data handlers rather than human handlers, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. And there's not always, and this is a gross generalization, obviously, but I've noticed a lack of self-awareness, a lack of personal development, I guess, and connection with themselves, with teachers themselves. Um, and I really truly believe that for me to be able to connect with a teen or anybody else for that matter, but particularly a traumatized teen or a traumatized child, I have to be very secure and I have to understand myself and my triggers and my the things that go on in my inner world really well and be able to balance that before I can actually approach another child. So, having said that, what do you think every educator or person that's working with these children needs to do before they actually work with that kid, on themselves?
Oh, I mean, it's a complex question. I think
Mm,
you have to know what you're going into. And I think that, as much as I hate the cliche of find your why, that gets pounded into us a lot. But I think if you were passionate about this, why are you passionate about it? And I think, when you struggle internally with things, what would we do with our kids? We would want our kids to find a connection, to find somebody to talk to, and to work through those things in a positive way. I think that's the same for adults. I
mm,
tell people all the time, I wholeheartedly believe that everybody should do at least 1 year of therapy.
uh,
And I think they should do that more often than not. You should do it as a kid, you should do it as an adult, you should do it as a young adult, as a grown adult,
yeah,
um, because we have to find ways to be okay with who we are.
mm,
And that part of that, when you're working with kids, especially, kids that can be difficult, and you start turning some of that inward, you get some secondary trauma and things like that. You
mm,
have to be able to work through those things. And I think, for my team that I have, is my group of teachers that I work with now, we talk to each other a lot and we have pretty open conversations and we have some hard conversations. And I mean, they don't share their intimate details outside of work, but at the end of that day, we break down what just happened, what we go through. We try to focus a lot on the wins, because our brains are designed to remember everything bad
yeah,
and to
they
kind of
are.
push away. Yeah. Well, it's a defense mechanism that, keeps us alive as animals, is that we have to remember everything that went wrong. That way we are aware of it later.
Mm,
The good things we don't have to remember as much because there's no defense around that. We don't have to develop skills to keep ourselves safe from that. And so I think a lot of it is, you've got to do, outside of work. I have a pretty good support team and I lean on them. I tell educators all the time, you have to have something you do. And it has to be something healthy. Now, I'm not telling you to, go run 5 miles, because I would be a hypocrite. I couldn't run a half a mile. But, and I'm not saying you have to eat healthy and do yoga, but, you have to find something that lets your brain release, whether that's, riding a dirt bike or even playing video games as an adult, or, you know,
mm.
um, but it has to be healthy. If you're
Gardening,
going home
whatever.
and
Yeah.
yeah, if it's a bottle of whiskey, that's not a healthy choice.
No.
But but
And you'll be surprised how many teachers have that bottle of whiskey for a
yeah,
snack.
I think you have to find that support group outside of education, and really the only people that's going to understand what you do is other educators.
Yeah.
It surprises me that we don't have more like social gatherings for educators that aren't built around we're all going to get together and learn a new thing about how to teach. We have a conference here in our state that I present at a few times, and it's for alternative education. And
Yeah.
the most enjoyable part about that whole thing, I mean, great, the presentations are great, and I don't want to talk those down because I'm giving 3, so I should be flight.
They're
But
fantastic. Yeah.
but the best part is when all that's over at like 4 o'clock and everybody goes and they change and then they just hang out in the hotel with a bunch of like-minded people. They know what you go through every day. And I tell our teachers every year when we go, meet all these other people because you're going to come and sit at a table and say, wow, I'm not the only one. You guys are going to share stories and you're going to say, oh, so our kids aren't unique. They're a lot like all these other kids. We're all going through the same thing. So I think, you got to find a good group of people around you. You got to definitely find, why am I passionate about this? Why do I want to do this? I think it's hard in a system that tells you you're only going to do it our way. And if you don't do it our way, then you can go find somewhere else to do this. Um,
Hence
we're,
alternative education, which actually
yeah.
an anomaly to me. It seems a bit bizarre. Surely all education is education.
Hmm.
Why do we have to have an alternative?
Yeah,
If
I
it worked,
agree.
if the system worked, we wouldn't need an alternative, Uh,
Hmm.
and if the alternative is working, why aren't we doing that?
That's a good question. I think when I work with a lot of alternative schools, some of the work they do is amazing. And I'm like, too bad we can't just do that for every kid. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly. Exactly. Why does it have to be alternative?
mhm.
Um, yeah, it's a bit stupid, really, if you think about it. It's
Yeah, you find a system that works outside of your system and you say, well, we could never do all those things. Why? I,
well, they are. So why can't you? That's
mhm.
um, it, it, it's always it's always boggled my mind. What I did like about working in the alternative system, though, which is a bit of a digression here, was a lot of those kids were put on the rubbish heap basically, and I found that the system didn't really care what I did with them as long as they were quiet and they were getting on and they were out of their hair. But
Mhm.
that gave me a lot of freedom because they
Yeah,
didn't
I
care.
think, I work with a lot of public school districts and schools and things like that, and a lot of things that, I'll tell them this is what we do and this is how it works. I'll say, well, we don't have time or we don't have the manpower. And I'm like, manpower? Like we have hardly any people that work with us. Like our student to teacher ratio is pretty low,
Yeah.
and we seem to be pulling this off every day. It is different because you do have that autonomy that they kind of are like, you can do whatever you want as long as you keep them quiet. And I remember when I first started as a special ed teacher, I was in a public school and I taught back then what they called the behavior disorder kids. And
Mhm.
they threw me in the basement and they really, my supervisor said, the less I see your kids and hear from you, the better your evals and more likely you are to have a job next year. Um, and so I thought, all right, so we're kind of stuck down here to, not be seen or heard. And then we started thriving and doing some amazing things. And I thought, am I allowed to brag about the stuff we're doing or should I keep that, but and a lot of it was because they just said, do whatever you want. And so I was like, well, I'm going to do what works.
Yes,
And
exactly.
I think, even my current position, being alternative, a lot of people don't want to know what we're doing. But then when we tell them, they're like, oh my God, how do you do that and get it all to work? And I say, well, I can come train you how to do it. And then when I do, they say, well, we don't have enough time or money. And I'm like, we have no time. We have no money. Please don't talk to me about money. You know,
Exactly.
so it's a doable thing. It just, it takes change and it takes work. And we talked a little bit before we started our interview. Change is hard and it takes a lot
Really.
of work. And once we
Yeah.
get into a routine as humans, we're just designed for routine. I tell our kids all the time, you guys thrive on routine. Think about when you get up in the morning, you do the same 5 things at first. And it's like, and that's just your brain wired to do routine. And so we fall back to what we know because what we know is easy. And when we start poking people and telling them you have to change that, you have to switch up that routine and do things differently, it's hard,
Of
you
course
know?
it's hard. you know, we were saying that, you know, if change was easy, we'd all have six packs and be running 5 miles a day, sort of thing. And that don't happen, unfortunately. But those changes is fundamentally, it's changing practices and habits, isn't it? And so that segues really well into my next question. What core practices and changes, I guess, do you think parents and teachers in general, educators, anybody who's working with these kids, what core practices would you say are central to success in this environment?
I think slow down and take a breath and remind yourself that, you know, this struggle's not mine, this struggle is somebody else's. And what hand do they need right now to pull them up? And you know, start asking more questions like, what do you need? How can I help you? What do you want right now? I mean,
Yeah,
all behavior serves a purpose and a need. And so I think even as a parent, you know, my wife and I both worked in this field for many years. So our kids will say, like, you know, oh God, my parents never yelled at us. We just had to have conversations.
yeah,
And I thought, it's not worth yelling at you. That's just a loud conversation where I have two people in crisis who's all that brain chemistry and everything's all gunked up. And now we're not making anything except for hurt happen. And so I think, you know, just stepping back, taking a breath and saying, what's really going on here? And what
yeah,
does this little person need from me? Because if
yeah,
I can teach them how to meet their needs or walk them through that of how to meet their needs, then they become more self-sufficient and they become better problem solvers. And eventually they become better adults because they understand that, look, when I have these feelings and emotions, they're valid, but I have to process them and communicate them and work through them in a certain way that doesn't harm others. It says, you know, we don't have any right to harm another person. And so I think the biggest shift would be is to keep in mind that you're working with people who need people, and take a breath, take a step back, and, you know, figure out what can I do for you, and
mm,
expect the same thing out of people that you work with. You know, if I come home angry or irritated or something, um, I hope that my wife is a good listener and asks me, what do you need from me right now? How can I help you through this? Um, because as an adult, it's rare that we tell adults, you know, shut up and go sit down. We don't do that because as adults, we take them more seriously. We go, oh my gosh, Joe seems
yeah,
pretty upset. What's going on? Well, why
yeah,
can't we do that with kids? And then a big thing for me is removing that idea that everything has to be punitive. People don't have to pay for their mistakes in a way that makes them humiliated or feel bad about themselves, because now you've just taken somebody who's struggling and kind of punched them in the face. You've made them hurt more by saying, look what you did and look how it affected all these people and look at you and look at your inability to solve problems. And I mean, let's be real, with brain development in kids, our expectation for them to problem solve and rational think is a little absurd. They're not going to do that until their mid 20s. And for us to expect them to do that now is just sort of silly. But, you know,
it
we
is.
can teach them how to do that. We can say, okay, hold on, slow down. Let's get everybody where they need to be. All right, now we're in a place where we're breathing and we're calm. Let's have a conversation about what happened from your point of view. Why did those things happen? How can we make those choices? What did you need at the time? You know, I think so. Again, it just comes down to slow down, take a breath, step back, and figure out what do they need and how can you be a
In
part of
this
that
time.
solution.
And even if it's, you know, I always found, because we did a lot of work around restorative practice. Um,
Mhm.
it's a big buzzword in here in New Zealand, and it has been for quite some time. Um, but some people, it's also about gauging your crowd, you know, because if you try and jump in and do a restorative immediately, it quite often you're actually adding fuel to the fire. I found that it paid, like you said, to slow down, but to actually get the child, or whoever, away from the situation, allow them to calm down, give them the time to breathe and stop and pause before you actually jump in and try and make anything happen, because otherwise you're basically pushing the proverbial uphill.
Yeah. And I think that, if you're being restorative, it'll happen. There's a time where you get to sit down, once the storm is over and the clouds are gone and now we're kind of sitting in a puddle together. That's when you can say, well, what happens next? What do we need to do to sort of make things okay? And let them figure that out. What do you need to do to make things okay? And, I think kids are they know. They'll say, well, I probably need to apologize to some people. And I don't think that has to be a humiliating thing. You can say, well, who and how do we want that to look? And how can I help you do that? Or they'll say, I may need to fix the hole I put in the wall, or they know what needs to be done. And I think if we guide them through that in a way that says, well, let's do that in a way where you have dignity and you can do this where you're repairing the damage in a way that the person who's been damaged, or the thing, or what have you, will feel that you are being compassionate, but you don't have to hurt because of it. I run into a lot of people want consequences, and I think when you look at consequences, and here in the US, we have one of the worst prison systems in the world. It doesn't seem to be working, throwing everybody in prison all the time and throwing everybody in jail. And as a kid, I was a kid who was diagnosed with a behavior issue and oppositional defiance, and I was ADHD. And if you whipped me, I thought it was kind of worth it most of the time. I would say, well, I'm going to do this behavior, and all they're going to do is hit me like 4 times. It'll really hurt. I'll cry for a little bit, but then it's over. It's totally worth it. I
And
never
then I
had
can do it again.
yeah. I mean, once I recover, I might think it's worth it again. But I think if somebody would have taught me that, look, this is why what you did isn't okay, and this are the people that it affected, not in a guilty way, but in a way that made me understand my behavior, I probably would have changed it sooner. I probably would have had a little bit more of a colorful high school world rather than the one I had.
Rather than, which was colorful in its own way, but not in a particularly positive color by the sounds of it. Indeed. It's talking to you, it's like reflecting on my whole practice as an educator, for over 30 years, and also for 25 years of those 30 years I was working with special ed and alternative education. So what I'm hearing and what I've kind of formulated over the years is that really these 3 things that we really need to be teaching our kids, only 3 things, and everything could or should revolve around these 3 things. One is connection. That's absolutely primary. Connection to themselves, first of all, connection to each other, connection to the earth, connection to whatever higher power you subscribe to, because even if you're atheist, you still subscribe to some kind of higher thinking or order or whatever. And the second is communication, which is what we've been talking about. And the third is creativity. But you can't get creativity without connection or communication, because if those 2 aren't established, the creativity is nigh impossible, because the connection and communication bring around consciousness, and consciousness is where creativity comes from. Being conscious of your ability to create. And we all are creating all the time, whether we do it consciously or not.
Yeah.
So if we could get our kids to create the best life that they could create consciously, can you imagine we change the world in no time, in a generation?
Yeah, I think that's great. I agree with you. Yeah.
Mm. Oh, well, hopefully one of these days we'll establish a system that does that, you know, that inculcates those three things. And talking of which, here's my $64 million question. If you could magically change the system overnight, what would it look like in the morning?
I think it would be more kid focused. I think a lot of times people say kid focused when really what they mean is academically focused. I have no doubt working in the world of special education with kids with various learning abilities that we're designed to learn. And we're designed to learn to, you know, our maximum ability. And some of those abilities vary, but we all have one. And I think if we start focusing on making education a safe place, making it a place where people can be free to be who they are,
Mm,
and like you said, be creative the way they are, we can do academics in such an amazing way. There's so many teachers that find a way to teach those hard subjects in such a creative and fun way. And a
mm,
lot of times those teachers are given the ability to do that. And so I think if we could give back teachers the ability to say, look, we're not a corporation, we're a school. Um, we're a public entity. It is here to create productive citizens, no matter what kind of citizen they want to be. They'll be a productive citizen that contributes to their community in a positive way. And
yeah.
if we start working on that and know that, you know, those academics will come, they'll be there. And there's some things, and gosh, this will probably tick off a lot of educators. There's some things that we make kids learn that they probably don't need to learn anymore. I think, you know, we've got systems that have everybody has to graduate and then do something. And we make all these requirements for them to graduate. And a lot of those requirements are things that they'll never use in their life. And so I
Absolutely.
think, you know, revamping that, and I am such a huge hater of standardized testing because I think that it's not a fair measurement. And it's silly to me if you look at, you know, national and international data on standardized testing and how it's not the best measurement of a kid's abilities and strengths, but yet we do it because we need numbers to show to people to prove that we're this
And
great
we're
corporate
doubling
entity
down
that
on
can,
doing it, aren't we,
yeah,
at the moment? It's it's ludicrous. Yeah.
it is. Yeah. So that's what if I could wave a magic wand, I would say give teachers some autonomy,
Yeah.
allow them to be creative, set goals that are built around what our children need to use to be productive citizens in the world. And the academics will come. Your kids who are strong in an area, capitalize on that. Your kids who aren't strong in a certain area, make sure they have those skills, that they have enough in that area that they can be successful in what they do.
Mm.
Um, so I think, you know, making it more kid-based, and it's not kid-based right now. It's public-based to everybody's competing. And I think schools have moved away. Well, I don't know if we ever were like really a solid family of love that, you know, as schools. I think ever since you look back, it's always been a very systematic system.
Industrialized. It's an
Yeah, it's very
industrial system.
industrialized.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a good word.
Yeah.
That's the word I was looking for.
Sausage
Yeah.
in, yeah,
And
meat in, sausage out, sort of
yeah,
thing. I mean, even the way, I don't know, you probably are very familiar with Sir Ken Robinson, um, and you know his ideas around creativity and school and
hmm,
education. But he did an amazing TED talk around kind of the history of school, of mass schooling, and how
hmm,
it was very much based on the factory model, because
yeah,
what they were trying to achieve was workers for the factories.
yeah,
So, you know, what other system in the world, and this will, you know, you'll make the connection very quickly. In what other system in the world do you have to wear a uniform? I don't know if you have many schools left in the US that wear uniform, but I know here in New Zealand and possibly the UK and places like that still have uniforms in school.
Mhm.
And have to ask to go to the toilet and move around with bowels and can't actually leave until they're allowed to leave. What other institution does that? Prison,
Mhm.
you know, and we do that to our kids. It's it, it's astounding, really, when you make that connection.
Yeah, I think we have a system that was designed a few hundred years ago with a purpose to create people to do a certain thing.
Mm,
And we don't live in that world anymore. We haven't for a long time. And that world, as we move away from it, we're moving faster and faster and faster every day.
mm,
And so for us to, any other industry would adapt their system in order to meet the needs of what they're doing.
yeah,
Education is one of the few that says, well, no, we're fine. We're just going to keep doing it this way because this is what works.
exactly.
But even factories and product lines, they adapt and they overcome and they change and they remodel things in order to meet the needs. Where our education system is like, we're good, we're okay, we're just going to keep doing this same thing that we've been doing. Um,
We'll
and
keep
I think,
banging our heads against a wall. Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
think one of my things that I often say, and sometime at some point somebody's probably going to pat me on the nose and tell me to stop doing that, is that education systems are run by non-educators. Um,
Yes.
we're one of the few jobs when I think of doctors. When we have a head doctor that works for the government, it's because they were a doctor
Mm-hmm,
and they're a very admired doctor that was very good at what they do. And
mm-hmm,
people say, well, they should help set the rules for being a doctor.
mm,
Even construction, the way we build houses, they find these master builders that say, how big should this board be in order for it to be safe? And they say, well, based on my years of experience, it be like this. In education, we have a whole bunch of people who've never taught. They've never been in a classroom, and their education experience was probably very different than the majority. They're a
mm-hmm,
minority education. They grew up in very different educational systems than we did. I went to public school in a not so good place, one of the worst producing public schools in the US.
mm-hmm.
So they can't relate to what my school experience is.
No.
But they have also never been teachers. They didn't go to college to be teachers, but they're the ones that get to make decisions that are passed down to tell us how to do our job.
Mm.
And they have no idea what our job is. And we're one of the few industries where we have our our system is being controlled by people who never worked in our system. And you know,
Yeah,
that's, I think, mucking it up.
yeah, absolutely. Education has always been a very strong political football, hasn't it?
Hmm.
Because basically, I think that it's based on the premise that knowledge is power. So you control the knowledge and you control the power. And
Hmm.
um, and uh, yeah, it becomes a very dark area if you really think of how systemically it's you know, we're basically suppressed systemically as educators because
Hmm.
education is so important in forming a population that will either comply or not comply, you know. But I think they're kind of losing control at the moment around that aspect because, like you said, the world has changed in unrecognizable to what it was 100 years ago
Hmm.
when math education came in, and even next year it'll be completely different to what it looks like this year. If I think about AI, you know how AI has completely taken over. And that's been in the last year that I've noticed, literally in the last year.
Mhm.
AI, this, AI, that. And it's just taken a year to completely change the landscape when it comes to business, when it comes to, you know, even teaching.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah, I think that, the internet, education used to be something that wasn't for the masses. It was for, a select few. And then we decided to make it for the masses and do it in a certain way. And now education's for everybody. I mean, I can get on Google and find studies and data and anything I want on anything. And, so education's at the fingertips of everybody. And if we know that our kids have that at their fingertips, how do we teach them then to use it, embrace it, and build with it, and do explore the many things that they want to do, and come back to that creative side of, there's so many things that you don't know exist. Why don't we show you that they exist? And you might find, I tell a lot of our juniors and seniors, because, there's this idea that by the time you're junior or senior in high school, you should probably have everything you're going to do for the rest of your life figured out. And it causes them a ton of stress.
Big
And I
stuff.
tell them all the time, you don't have to go to college right away or ever. And
Yeah.
kids are like, well, I have to go to college. I'm like, well, you don't have to declare a major right away or ever. I mean, maybe at some point, if your parents are paying for that, that might bother them. But you could go that, you can go that first year and just explore. There's so many things that you don't know that you can do. Go see the things that you can do, or the things that interest you, and say, wow, I didn't even know that was a job. And now that's what I'm going to be.
Yeah. Or create a job, honestly.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
because jobs are being created as we speak, because technology is advancing so fast. And also, it's not just technology. I think technology has been the booster for it, but we as human beings are expanding our universe, so to speak, all the time, all the
Hmm.
time. And who's to say that you actually even have to go to college to have a successful career or business? Or I was talking to a friend of mine who actually is a teacher, but she homeschooled her children, five of them, and all five of them are young entrepreneurs. They've gone on. Some of them went to university. Her one daughter, who's in her 30s, is doing her PhD. But I think two of them went to university. The other three who didn't go to university are all young entrepreneurs with their own businesses and doing exceptionally well. Never bothered going to college or doing anything that basically wouldn't be relevant in their lives. And they've created this space and they're doing incredibly well. So absolutely, I totally agree with you. There's no The sky's the limit for our kids if they can only see that that is the limit.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, we've been at this for nearly an hour, Joe. I'd love to invite you back again sometime, and actually, hopefully, we can actually get alive out there. I will try. I will try and iron out that kink in the system. But thank you so much for spending the time and being here with us today. And I really look forward to working with you in the future.
Well, thank you. Like I said, I'm honored. I didn't know that that many people would want to hear what I had to say. So I'm excited to have an opportunity and get to speak with people, and encourage them. Of course, I have to, do a little self promotion to buy my book, or, even like one of my
Absolutely.
pages, and reach out. I love meeting people from all over the place, different educators, and I'm always baffled that our struggle is worldwide. We're struggling with a lot of the
But
same things, and we feel so isolated sometimes, like, well, no, this only happens here. It's everywhere,
It's everywhere. It's everywhere. I mean, the US story is almost absolutely, yeah. It's the New Zealand system is a carbon copy,
mhm.
and what's happening here is a carbon copy.
And I think what's on a positive note is a lot of the people that I meet with are understanding that trauma is real and that people have various degrees of neurodivergent things that they struggle with every day. And we're acknowledging that mental health is real
Yes.
and that we can't just, not talk about our old depressed Aunt Susie or whatever. It's okay to talk about those things. And I
Mm,
think the more the world shifts in that direction, that it's okay to acknowledge that we all have struggles and all of us, aren't perfect. And then embracing those imperfections and saying, well, gosh, if you're okay, then I'm okay,
mhm,
because I thought I was the only one. And we're acknowledging that we're not the only ones and we can do things about it. And it's okay for people, especially young people, to express themselves openly. And I love that there's so many people out there that just want to hear those kids and they want to do some different things and they want to change a
mm,
system of we don't talk about that to a system of we definitely talk about that as much as you need to. That
absolutely.
kind of warms my heart that that's a big push I'm seeing everywhere too. And that I think is amazing.
Absolutely. I guess we have to get to a point, a turning point,
Hmm.
a point where it gets so bad that things have to change. And perhaps we're at that point now.
I
So
think
thank
there's a lot of minds being opened. Yeah.
yes. So thank you very, very much. I really appreciate your time. And I apologize for the technical issue, and
Oh,
I apologize to all those who are watching this recording as well. But sometimes Zoom does the most bizarre things, and I will get onto it though, so that the next time it is live. Thank you, Joe.
thank you so much. I appreciate it.